The Forgotten Room. Maggie was an ordinary woman living in an ordinary town, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. She worked as a librarian and kept to herself. When she found an old Victorian house for rent at an impossibly low price, she jumped at the chance. The landlord, Mr. Hargrove, was a hunched old man with watery eyes. As he handed her the keys, he hesitated. "Don't go into the locked room," he warned. "What's inside?" Maggie asked. "Just don't," he said, his tone sharp. Then he smiled, as if trying to erase the tension. Maggie moved in the next day. The house was creaky and drafty, but charming in its own way. The locked room was on the second floor, at the end of the hallway. Its faded, peeling door was unremarkable, yet she couldn't help but be curious. She ignored the room for a week, but strange things began happening. At night, she heard soft thuds and faint whispers. Lights flickered, and the air grew colder near the locked door. One night, she woke to the sound of someone, or something, scratching at the door from the inside. By the second week, Maggie couldn't take it anymore. Armed with a flashlight and a hammer, she pried the door open. The room was small and bare, except for a child's rocking chair in the center. Dust hung in the air, and the faint smell of decay lingered. On the far wall was a mirror, large, ornate, and cracked down the middle. As she approached it, the reflection flickered. She saw herself, but not quite. The figure in the mirror looked like her, only thinner, paler, and with sunken, lifeless eyes. "Maggie," the reflection whispered, though its lips didn't move. Terrified, Maggie stumbled back. The room seemed to shift and warp around her, the walls closing in. The rocking chair began to creak, moving back and forth on its own. She fled, slamming the door shut. That night, the whispers grew louder. The reflection's voice echoed in her dreams, begging her to come back. By the third week, Maggie was barely sleeping. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, and she often caught glimpses of herself in mirrors, her other self. She tried to leave the house, but her car wouldn't start. Every time she reached for her phone, the battery was mysteriously dead. One night, unable to resist the pull of the whispers, Maggie returned to the room. The door was already open. Inside, the mirror was no longer cracked. Her reflection smiled at her. "It's your turn," it said. The reflection reached out of the mirror and grabbed her wrist. Maggie screamed, but it was useless. She was pulled into the glass, her body twisting and fading into the void. The next morning, the house was silent. The mirror in the locked room now showed nothing but a still, empty rocking chair. When the landlord arrived to check the property, he noticed the door was ajar. He sighed, shaking his head as he pulled it shut. "Always the curious ones," he muttered. Then he locked the door and left, waiting for the next tenant to come along.